Hello there, Mr. Mash here. Welcome to my macroeconomics series. The fact that you are here means that you've met the requirements to proceed with economics. So I want to congratulate you for that. Or you are just enjoying economics and you're learning and you enjoy this content. Welcome to the channel. So we are going to go through macroeconomics, and this is an introduction to the macroeconomy. This word macro actually means large. In the microeconomics course, we made a distinction between the macroeconomy and the microeconomy. And you realized throughout the microeconomics course, we spoke about the smaller units of the economy. How do individuals make their decisions to maximize their satisfaction, which we call utility? How do firms maximize their revenue? How do firms minimize their costs? How do they maximize their profit? These are smaller units of the economy. How do firms compete in terms of market structure? Throughout this course, we are going to look at the overall economy. We are going to look at the large parts of the economy. So this word means large. We are going to aggregate. And remember, I said this word aggregate means total. So aggregate means total. We look at how does the economy perform in overall. There are different measures of the health of the economy. All right. You want to look at, is the economy growing? And that growth of the economy is measured by GDP. Okay, this is one of the main things that economists look at. The GDP, it means gross domestic product. It's something we are going to talk about in detail in a later chapter, but this is just a measure of the output of an economy, the value of the final product in an economy in a specific time period. So this is used to measure economic growth. The other things that economists look at are going to be things like your inflation, prices, and the price is going up or down. That is measured by your consumer price index. They also look at things like income inequality, the gap between the rich and the poor. So this is visualized by what they call a Lorenz curve, and then calculated by, for instance, the Gini coefficient. And there's also the interaction of a country with other countries, which is measured by the balance of payments. How much money is coming in from other countries and how much money is going out from our economy. So that is measured by the balance of payments. And also employment, which is very important. So I wrote GDP here, which is something I'm going to talk about for a bit now as I introduce the macroeconomy. And this gross domestic product is a measure of output. There are different ways of calculating the gross domestic product, but these three approaches, they look at three major flows in an economy. All right. So GDP, the output is measured using three matrices. The GDP can be measured using the value of the final product. Production. The GDP can be measured using the income, the total income in an economy, or the GDP can be be measured by the total spending in an economy. Which is why you would find that economists, they use the words output. They use the words output, income, and expenditure interchangeably to refer to GDP. Both of these terms refer to GDP. And these three are actually referred to as the three major flows in an economy. So these three are actually referred to as the three major flows in an economy, which means our GDP is a flow variable. All right. So production in an economy is done by firms. And these firms, they produce using the factors of production, which you remember as land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So the firms are going to produce using factors of production. When they produce, they then pay the income to these factors of production to the households. We assume that all factors of production are owned by households. So households own the land, households own their labor, they own capital, and they own their entrepreneurial ability. So households are going to receive income from firms in the form of wages for labor. So wages for labor, rent for land, interest on their capital, and profit for entrepreneurship. So this is the income that households would then receive. The income is then spent. So the income is then spent in the goods market by the households. All right. And then the spending is done on goods that are produced. Then firms get more money and they produce more. It's a circular flow because production feeds into the income for households. The income they get, they spend it. They are spending it on production, and firms can produce more. All right. I want you to take note of this. We are going to consider 4 sectors in the entire economy. The total spending in the economy is going to be determined by households are going to spend. So C is going to be the consumption by households, and then firms, the spending of firms is called investments, and government spending is called G. And then there's a foreign sector, the buying and selling of goods in the foreign sector. This is called net exports. So we add the net exports. These net exports are simply given by the exports minus imports. All right. So these are the 4 sectors in which all the entire spending is going to come from. All right. So I don't want you to get confused at some point when I use the words output and income or GDP interchangeably. Honestly, in equilibrium, these mean the same thing. All right. But now I'll try and be consistent and explain whenever it is necessary. Let's look at how these major flows interact in the different sectors of the economy. All right, we want to look at how these sectors interact in the different sectors of the economy. Let's start with a very simple. So let's call this the circular flow of income and spending. I'm going to call this the circular flow of income and spending. Circular flow of income and spending. Let's start with a very simple model where we have 2 sectors. We have firms, which is one sector which we call the investments. We have our firms here. And we have our households. Okay, we have our households. These 2 sectors are going to interact through 2 markets. They interact through the goods market and they interact through the factor or resource market. All right. So what I want you to remember is this. We assume that all the factors of production are owned by households, and all production is done by the firms, and these firms and households, they interact through the goods market and the factor market. All right. So your firms are going to produce your goods and services. So the goods and services are going to move from the firms to the households. They flow in this way. So this is the flow of goods and services from the firms to the households. And they first go to the goods market, and in this market, this is where households buy these goods and services, and then they get these goods and services, right? The households are going to receive income from the firms through the factor markets. All right. These households are going to supply all their factors of production, which we assumed they are owned by households. So they supply all their factors of production, which are assumed, and then these factors of production are going to be used by firms in their production process. Okay, and then the households are going to receive income from the factor market, because the firms are going to go to the factor market to purchase. So they're going to spend in the factor market, they purchase factors of production. Households receive that income. Households receive the income in the form of wages, rent, interest, and profits. Okay, and then they then use that income in the goods market. So the spending in the goods market is done by households, and the firms are going to receive the money coming from the household, coming from the goods market, because they are the ones responsible for the production of goods and services. This is how they interact, which is why it's a circular flow. You have this clockwise direction where there's a flow of goods and services and factors of production, and then the anti-clockwise direction is where there's the circulation of income and expenditure. All right. These arrows, don't claim them. Understand how these are interacting, because they might put households on top and firms at the bottom, and it might confuse you. Just understand that in the factor market, it's households that are making money because they own factors of production. In the goods market, it's firms that are making money because they produce goods and services. All right. So these are the two sectors that we start from in a two-sector model. We can then add another very important sector, which is quite big, which is the government. And the government interacts with all of these. The government interacts with the factor markets, right? In the factor market, the government is going to spend in the factor market. So going this way, this is government spending. The government can spend by giving these factors subsidies. They can subsidize labor, they can subsidize capital, and so forth. And then the government also needs factors of production. So the government is going to get factors of production, people, the police working for the government, and so forth. These are coming from the factor markets. And then with households, the government is going to collect taxes from households, right? And then the government is going to supply goods and services to firms. So usually these are public goods. A topic on its own, we'll talk about that. Same thing with the goods market. You see, the government is actually all over the place. The government is going to spend in the goods market. They buy things, they buy their cars, guns, whatever they are buying from the goods market. And then they are also going to be receiving, so this is government expenditure, and then they are going to receive goods and services from the goods market, right? With households, they are going to be collecting taxes. The government is going to collect taxes from households, but they also spend on households. This important government sector is something we are going to talk about in detail much later on. So don't stress too much about it, like how do government spend in households. These are things you are familiar with already. They are called transfer payments, and they differ from country to country. Like in South Africa, there is the child support grants, unemployment insurance, and so forth. This is the spending by government to households. It's a very big topic on its own. There's actually an entire subject called public economics that deals with how the government interacts with all these different sectors and markets in the economy. You can see it's a big thing, right? And then the last sector, remember we now have three, because we said our entire economy is given by spending by households, consumption, which is this one. And then it's given by firms, investments by firms, which was I, and then government by spending, government expenditure, which is G. We have three sectors. The fourth one was the foreign sector, where we said in the foreign sector there is exports and imports. So you could put the foreign sector here. You could put the foreign sector here and say the foreign sector is interacting with households, and the foreign sector is interacting with firms. Okay, just take note that when in an economy, if you are buying from other countries, we are importing, and when we import, money is leaving the country, and this is called a leakage. And if we are selling our goods to other economies, these are called exports. And the exports, these are actually called an injection. It's money that is being injected into the economy. Okay, so there are a lot of things that are going on here which might look confusing, but I hope you get the idea behind how different sectors interact in an economy. All right. So there is also another sector which is called the financial sector. But the financial sector in economics is not considered to be a real sector. The real sector is where goods and services are produced. Everything I've shown you here constitutes the real sector. The financial sector makes things easier for the real sector. So you're going to have your financial intermediaries, like your commercial banks, where you have units of the economy that are lacking. Okay, they have a deficit. They're going to go there to borrow. And units that have an excess, who are saving, they're going to put their money in the intermediaries, so they have a surplus. And then that financial intermediaries, where there's a smooth flowing of money, enables the real economy to produce. Interest rates play a huge part in that interaction. So that's the other sector, which we are not going to go too much on in this section. We will talk about it much later on. But in the meantime, I hope you understand this. We will talk about everything I've discussed today, bit by bit. It's things that we talk about throughout this entire macroeconomics course. So stay tuned, and I really hope you enjoyed this introduction. But for now, Mr. Mash is out. Enjoy economics.